You're not meant to be low maintenance. You're meant to be high maintenance because you love a lot, you care a lot, and you should expect the same in return. If it's rooted in reciprocity, you're never too much or high maintenance. That cannot be the standard that we're applying to ourselves.
If you've ever seen a handwritten red ink quote on Instagram that stopped you in your scroll and got straight to your heart, there's a good chance that that quote came from today's guest, Case Kenny. Case is the host of the popular podcast, New Mindset, Who Dis? And the author of a new book, The Opposite of Settling, How to Get Everything You Want Out of Love and Life Without Losing Your Spark. In this episode, we talk about how we both manifest our greatest desires, how to date properly, which means finding the quickest and most authentic way from a maybe to a yes or a no, and the power of journaling to transform your life. Case Kenny, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Hello. Thank you for having me. What an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. The honor is mine. And we're here to talk about your new book, but I'm just going to dive into, settling up, a new concept. What inspired settling up? I love the use of language, and we're going to get into that a little later, but settling up, what is it?
For sure. Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, I don't know if it's a new concept in that I think it's the concept that we originally had when we were younger for what love and a relationship offered. Perhaps I put some new language around it, which kind of is my thing. So I'll take that. But I mean, it's the opposite of settling. It's also the opposite of settling down, which funnily enough, that was what I was originally going to title the book, The Opposite of Settling Down. But then I was like, let's just drop the down because this encompasses a lot of different things. But the original emotion that I had was, everyone says it, right? We say, I want to settle down. Or you're asked, when are you going to settle down? I've had my fun. I want to settle down. And as much as that's a nice thing to say, and I don't really have beef with the idea behind us saying it, it has this weird energy to it that I always thought was like, that's a weird sales pitch. It's got the word down in it. And it leads people, men in particular, and then also people just in general as they get older, to make this assumption that inevitably the search for love or a relationship itself will have this down effect. Either you become boring, or you kind of lose your spark, you lose your pizzazz, or inevitably in the search of love, you're going to have to make some consolations. You're going to have to really negotiate yourself to death. So I always just thought it was this weird terminology that didn't do justice the sales pitch that I think is love and is a relationship. So much so that I wrote a book about it and really kind of try to help people come back to what I call settling up, which would be the opposite of settling, which would be the opposite of settling down. Just a more optimistic, joyful, and exciting redefining of love. That is, a relationship should make you feel like more of yourself. So that's hotter and funnier and more ambitious and wealthier. It's all about more. It's all about amplification, not down and not less. So that's the quick sales pitch. And even that, I think that's a better sales pitch than I want to settle down. So there you have it.
It's so good. And I'm so glad we started this way, because as you're talking, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Like, language is so powerful, and we have to start to become aware. And I know that you are a big, proponent of this. Like, even our, sayings that we use every day or that are trending now in this day and age, it's like, I'm dead. I'm dying. It's like, we don't want to say those things. We don't want to affirm to our bodies.
I'm spiraling. That's when I hear all the time, I'm spiraling.
Oh, God. And so this concept of settling up, or even when you say I'm settling down to get married, you're so correct in that, like, we are sacrificing like there's a negative connotation to it. So this concept, especially now as we become more aware and we feel like we have more choice and we do the personal work and want to do that work together in relationship, it's like, it is a settling up. It's a 1 + 1 = 4 or 11 or whatever. Yes. It's, you want to do the work on yourself and then show up whole, and then knowing relationships are mirrors, amplify that together and do the work together and help each other do that with vulnerability and love and compassion and, holding space.
Couldn't agree more. You said it great. I mean, even in that, like, my whole thing is word choice, right? It's basically a book about how we can speak to ourselves in a more honest and uplifting way about the things that we want. And it's like 50% about dating, but 50% about yourself. Like, to the point of, like, if love is supposed to be an amplification effort, what are we amplifying? we have to know that first and foremost, our sense of self, our essence, our spark, our joy, our ambition, figuring that out first, and then doing it together with someone else. Even in one of the opening chapters, I also talk about this other word that we love to use, which is I want to build a life with someone. And I also have somewhat beef with the idea of building life with someone, not in the sense, of course, you are building a life with someone. You're building a legacy. You're building a family. Those are accurate uses of the word build for sure. But I also hear people a lot in the way that they put this enormous amount of pressure on themselves and they say, well, I need a partner to build my dream life. And it always begged the question, well, what does that mean you're doing in the meantime? You can't build your dream life without a partner. And again, it's just word choice. It's the semantics of the word, but it's also the depth and the intensity of the pressure that comes from those words. And so I advocate in the book, it's you build yourself, you build your best life, and then you find someone and you amplify and you do life together. It's not this waiting room type mentality where until you have your partner, you can't build your best life. Someone comes along and certainly amplifies it in a way that is very tangible and maybe enhances that best life idea. But the word of build life versus do life, I think, is significant. And it's also another word choice that I think we should lean away from and into.
I love that. As you're speaking, I literally just came to this realization because I just went through a separation that will eventually end up, in divorce. And I dated someone for 6 months, which we'll get into because it was a total situationship that, I'm very self-aware. So like
Yeah.
there was still a lot of learnings and like clear patterns that people are like, Kelly, you have a clear pattern but
Yeah.
I still chose consciously to be in this relationship because there was a lot of opportunity for growth. It was safe, it was hot, it was fun until it was not, right? So
Mm.
as long as you're practicing awareness and like using it for growth and enjoyment and pleasure and all these things. But once it starts to switch into, not fulfilling and actually going the other way and actually hurting a little bit, then you've got to make a change. But all of that to say right now, I met this person, they're like, how are you single? Why are you single? I was like, because I've just been in a relationship for 14 years and I want to do life. I want to do me. I want to figure out what brings me joy. Obviously we wake up and we realize we've abandoned ourselves at some point, usually women early 40s
Mm.
or, hopefully sooner. But I want to stop doing that and totally align with what lights me up. And then like that person's going to come and want to do it with me, So that's what I'm figuring out right now. And I love that you say that because we've got to like find out who we are and what lights us up and then hold on to that. Of course, relationship has compromise, but like we gotta tune into what lights us up without needing to look externally for someone else to do that for us.
Yeah. And I referenced it in the book. Like what you just referred to is so beautiful. And I refer to it and I borrow some of the work of James Hillman, who wrote a book called The Soul's Code. And he talks about your essence. Like we all have this essence. And, it's something that makes us unique. And sometimes language like that, it becomes a little hokey. Like, oh, sure, we're all so unique. But we all have something about us that is a little bit different. Different versions, different spectrums, different combinations, different balances of things that is unique to us. And we could spend a lot of our life ignoring it in favor of trying to sit in the middle and be normal. We could also spend a lot of our life burying it because we think it pushes away the right people. And so I really think a lot of our life's work is coming back to that essence and figuring out what it is such that you would know if someone amplifies it. And James Hillman talks about it in the sense of, he calls it the acorn theory, which is the idea that inside each of us, we have an acorn that is our essence. And you could plant an acorn in a field and you can water it and you can hope your hardest that it will turn into a banana plant, but it won't because that's not what acorns do. It needs to become an oak tree. And, I think often in life, you realize that looking back when you're 40, 50, 60, looking back and you're like, this was the way it was meant to be. This is who I've always been meant to become. I've just been ignoring it for a long time. So I think like a conversation about that and your essence and your spark it's like a cart and horse thing. Like we have to have that recognition first such that we would know if someone amplifies it so that we can know if we could do life together. So we can know it's not settling down. It's an amplification of that quality. So yeah, I think what you just said is beautifully anecdotal about that thing, about this essence that we ignore a lot because we date to be liked. That's the biggest beef I have nowadays is everyone is dating to be liked and not dating to be seen. And perhaps that's a younger person thing. I mean, I'm not old by any means. I'm 37, but I see it a lot in your 20s. Like people, and who doesn't want to be liked? But we want to be liked. But when that's our motivation, that acorn is out of the picture. And I think starting from the acorn is such a more powerful thing to do, for one, and also it actually rewards the purpose of love as I see it.
Beautiful. Yeah. And that's why the opposite of settling is so good, people. If
Thank
you
you.
feel like you've lost your essence or you don't want to lose it again. Red pen. You're flashing around a red pen.
Red pen.
It's very your brand. Tell me about these quotes that I see. I think I first discovered you through Young Pueblo,
Oh,
reposting your quotes
yeah.
often, and I was like,
Oh,
"Who's this case guy?"
yeah, yeah.
But you write down. You're an avid journaler. I am too. We have a lot in common in that sense. Talk to me about the red pen quotes.
For sure. Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I don't have all the answers, certainly. Probably have many more questions than I do answers. All I know is that so much clarity in my life has come from writing things down, talking things through and writing down what I have learned in that reflection session. And even so now, like a good part of my life is spent leading these sessions called Mantra. I do them for organizations in the NFL, different groups where it's basically we all are writing our feelings down and we're creating mantras and affirmations based on reflection. And to me, it's the most powerful thing to do in life, not only to think and reflect, but then to sit down and choose words, choose the right words to reflect not only the way that we can honor a feeling, because we're never trying to bury a feeling, we're always trying to honor it, but also how can we speak to ourselves and how can we write to ourselves in a way that allows for hope and optimism. So, like, my whole thing is optimism. And I think red is a very optimistic color. I know initially some people are like, red is so violent and aggressive. And I think sometimes optimism and hope and belief and clarities and boundaries, it needs to pop. It needs to bite through in a world of noise and insecurity and distraction. So, yeah, I have gravitated towards red for several years for that very reason. It helps me be like, no, 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 this is the belief. It's surrounded by a lot of pop and circumstance and distraction, but the red, and you handwrite it, it's really helped me. And some people are always curious to find out that I handwrite all my quotes on a piece of paper, and then I take a photo of it and upload that. So some people are like, oh, you use an iPad and it's digital. It's not digital. I have a stack of papers in my extra bedroom here in Miami, where I keep all the quotes, and then I'll give them out at my events. I just think there's obviously neuroscience that supports the mind and body connection in the handwriting. But for me, it's always helped me believe something, but like truly believe it because I've written it down, and I've taken a tremendous amount of time to think about the 14 words, the 16 words that go into that piece of clarity.
I love that. Writing to me is such a medium too for like manifestation and also
Oh
just
yeah.
processing. Like, do you channel write or, like three different people from three different kind of modes of expertise have told me like you need to be channel writing. And so I'm like, oh God, that's so weird. Like what's going to come through me? But
Yeah.
I've been starting to practice it and it's been pretty wild. So do you do any of that?
Well, I suppose on the definition of it, to be honest, I mostly write in reaction to things that I've heard or beliefs that I've said myself before. Like most of my writing is a endeavor of just like updating my beliefs. Like you could say, I think love is this, and I could hear that and be like, that's beautiful. Let me write down what I think love is. So a lot of my writing, most of my writing is very just like prompt driven. I will give myself a prompt. I will act as if something you said is my prompt, and I will write in reaction to it. And then I'll just let that flow out of me the best I can. And I'll write 50 versions of one quote and be like, wow, look at all the beliefs I have. And then I'll tidy it up. So it becomes like creative writing plus just like, the intuitive moment of how I react to a prompt.
You mentioned earlier, like you guide NFL players and just people you work with in reflective writing and then turning it into a mantra. Can you give us an example of that? Because I think that's a fascinating tool.
Yeah, it's really my passion. Like I do them all the time all over the US. Yeah, so I mean, really the whole session is designed to help people realize that optimism is the belief that things can change, right? Just a basic belief principle. It's not the belief that everything is going to be fine and dandy. It's just the belief that things can change. how do you show yourself that things can change? It's entirely word choice. How do you relate to emotions? How do you relate to the people around you? How can you separate a feeling from your sense of self? So it's borrowing from a lot of different things, internal family systems, therapeutic approach. It's borrowing from word choice. It's borrowing from reflection and then vocabulary. It's literally a lesson in emotional vocabulary. But usually the output is I have people start these sessions with, I say, hey, quick, how do you feel right now? Like, what's a negative emotion in your life? And I have people gut react to that, and they write down the word that they're used to using. They write down the word that comes to them quick. And usually through the session, then we usually end the session with them doing it again, and they come up with an entirely different word, an entirely different way to approach the feeling. And usually it takes the format of a part of me feels this way, but, and then the rest is this incredibly uplifting way to honor the feeling, but provide the belief that things can change. And I think it's just such a timely thing, especially nowadays where we're in a beautiful time where we're so encouraged to go within and practice mindfulness in whatever format it is. Feel how you feel, be not judgmental of it. There's all these different modalities to help with that. I just haven't seen a whole lot of focus on, okay, we've done that. We're tapped in, we're aware. How do we speak to ourselves about the thing that we feel? And how can we ensure that we're not just borrowing words like, I feel anxious or I feel unlovable? Those are forest words. What are the tree words? And what are the personal words? And then how can we turn that into a part of me feels this way, but, and there's a belief statement about how things can change. So usually that's the flow. And it's this beautiful contrast of people starting these sessions with a very permanence oriented feeling. I feel unlovable. I feel lost. I feel burned out. And then at the end, it's a total rewording of that. And it's more specific and it's more poignant and it's more addressable, followed by a statement of why that doesn't define them. So it's very in my modality of like uplifting, but it's very rooted in like the science of emotional vocabulary. So yeah, I love doing it. It helps me every single time to watch people go through it as well.
So great. Again, yeah, the power of language and the way we speak to ourselves. And so many people are, including myself, in moments like just not conscious of the way we're constantly beating ourselves up and keeping ourselves trapped in these kind of more permanent states and identities that are absolutely, not truth, not,
And
ultimate truth.
and I would say it's interesting too because it's like it works both ways. It's like the way that we describe our feelings can keep us stuck in the feeling, but it's also the way that we anticipate a feeling describes the way that we then experience the feeling. So like I always say, like the words we use to describe our feelings dictate the way we experience the feeling. So it's not just retroactive where we're naming the feeling. The way we name the feeling moving forward is how we experience the feeling moving forward, if that makes sense. Like the example I always give is there was this study that I read in Harvard Business Review is these researchers divided these two groups of college students into two groups, and they gave them two separate instructions. The first group, they said, hey, one by one, you're going to go into this room. You're going to be isolated. You're going to do a task. And then afterwards, we're just going to ask you some general questions. That was group one. Group two, they said, hey, one by one, you're going to go into this room. You're going to have some me time to do a task. Afterwards, we're going to ask you some questions. So they were contextualizing being alone by either being that of you're isolated or it's me time. And you can see where I'm going with it. The me time group, when they asked them questions afterwards, the task was meaningless. They were just trying to gauge afterwards certain indicators of emotional positivity and happiness. Overwhelmingly so, the group that was told it was me time showed general signs of positivity and joy and just more emotional self-sufficiency. Just so being told that you're alone and isolated versus alone and me time then dictates how you experience it and how you reflect on it and how you label yourself. So it's a very interesting mix of like neuroscience and psychology and like creativity with the way that we name the emotion before we step into the emotion as well, which I think is really interesting.
It is so interesting and it's so powerful. And on the medical or the, health side that I've been dabbling in for however many years, the power of language that your practitioner, your doctor,
Yeah.
uses is so, so important and pivotal. And there's been so much research
Oh, yeah.
showing that your doctor's belief in a treatment or an outcome or statistic, you can pick up on that subtly with the language they use, the energy, their facial expressions.
Uh,
And your success rate is like directly tied to their expression of hope in an avenue or a path for you. So we really have to be careful and choose wisely and be really present when we're choosing our team if we're going through something serious, because we really want the practitioners and the doctors who, and God bless them. I mean, I don't blame them for being burnt out or bitter if they're in this kind of hard industry where they lose people all the time, and just
Yeah.
being a human. But the power of language, you need a doctor that is aware and just skews it enough to where they don't feel like they're giving false hope, but they do give hope and they do give encouragement so that you buy in and believe, because that placebo effect really has a real biochemical effect on your body.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting anecdote for sure. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of like a lot of the work that I tend to uncover with people is in lieu of having a team or a therapist or someone with more direct one-to-one interaction with, we borrow the internet's vocabulary as well. And that's why, of course, you see everyone throwing around words like anxious and depression sometimes and narcissist and like these just like words that are thrown around, which don't get me wrong, sometimes are absolutely accurate and need to be used. But I just find the average person grasps onto these words that are uh, socially and culturally in vogue, and we apply them to ourselves, and they may or may not fit. But I likely found usually they don't so much fit, and it's more emulation, which of course is not completely honest. And the goal is to get to a depth of honesty that we're capable of. So I think, yeah, whether it's leading by example as a therapist or a psychiatrist, or the internet at large, I think it's certainly an exercise in what are the words we're using, who are we borrowing them from, what do they mean, what do they mean to me. I think it's incredibly important.
Hmm. Yes. So I love your podcast, The New Mindset Who Dis, and
Oh, thank you.
you started like 2018 or something. You started before, like doing these kind of personal
Yeah.
solo episodes of self-reflection. I'd love to understand where you got your wisdom. Like, was there any imposter syndrome of like putting yourself out there, and like, because now you're kind of like an expert, or but it took practice to go through that, and like, I have the same kind of thing. Like, I don't claim to be an expert. My
Yeah.
film was successful because I curated the experts. But I do want to share more like you share. And so how did you get through that? And where is your source of wisdom?
Yeah. Well, I think, for me, I'm very stringent in not addressing things that I don't have experience with. So I stay away from topics of marriage and divorce and kids and these things that I don't have experience with. So I always try to speak from experience. I think the other thing is like mindfulness as the art of listening to yourself and then speaking to yourself. So the two-sided coin. That is absolutely a muscle, and it's something that you get so much better at. And you do something enough and you certainly develop pieces of clarity, and that's all I do. And I share those pieces of clarity, and I share the questions behind the clarity. I think most of my work is that of sharing the prompt, the catalyst, the realization that pushed me to my own piece of clarity. That's why, like, anytime I do lead sessions, it is never from the perspective of here is the thing. It's always from the perspective of here's the question, you figure out the thing. So, sitting within an area of expertise there, like I feel firmly rooted in that, in the mindfulness sector of leaning into the tens of thousands of hours, it feels like at this point, it's probably not quite, but of the reflection that leads to breakthroughs. And, I've done 720 some episodes. That's a lot of thinking. That's a lot of questioning. That's a lot of doing it over and over and over and over again. And then thousands of pages of writing. To me, it brings me a lot of joy. And, I refer to it more as clarity than wisdom, because I don't have all the answers and I just have more and more questions. But I think, to me, when I can look at myself and I can realize how much my work has humbled me rather than made me more confident, to me, that makes me feel like I'm doing the work in the right way and I'm sharing it from the right perspective. I think the more you do this kind of work in the sector and industry we're in, the thing to look for is how humble are you becoming? How humble are they becoming? Because that, to me at least, is the sign that they're receiving and they're practicing it versus, you talk about ego death like 1,000 times over. For
Hmm.
me is the occurrence.
Yeah. Well, the truly wise, which you are displaying evidence of, realize how much, the more they know, the more they realize the less they know. Right. So,
Yes,
yeah,
precisely.
I feel yeah. Um, the opposite of settling, how to get everything you want out of love and life without losing your spark. I know you're in a serious relationship with your life partner, girlfriend, I think, from the last
Yes.
time I've
Yes.
heard.
Yep.
Is that what inspired you to write this book? Like, show me your love trajectory and how you've finally kind of anchored into finding your person and what that evolution has been like.
For sure. I mean, so I wrote a book called Single is Your Superpower in 2020 because I was single at the time and, was very much an evangelist for the essential time in your life where you are single so that you can find your spark, so that you know if someone amplifies it. Certainly wrote this book from the perspective of my relationship and also just the evolution of thinking. Like chapter 1 of the book is about independence and how the right relationship, settling up, amplifies your independence. You become more independent as a result of a relationship, which is the total flip flop on, I think, what a lot of people think. People see independence in a relationship and they say, oh, something must be wrong. When you're younger, also, you start seeing, as maybe from a male perspective, a relationship being something that robs you of your independence, your ambition, right? It's going to become this we, not me, I'm going to lose my spark type thing. And I think my biggest evolution was realizing that that's not true, that the right person absolutely supercharges your independence. I reference something in the book, just a observation in child rearing called the dependency paradox, which is just the observation that the closer a child is with a caregiver or a parent, the more willing the child is to be independent because they know that they have the love and support and loyalty of a caregiver. I always thought that was beautiful. And then I was like, well, why isn't that the same mentality in an adult relationship? In that you trust each other, you have the compatibility, you have the communication, you should absolutely feel inspired to be independent. And that was honestly kind of the catalyst for the book, especially within the context of down and in the context of doing and building. And, it totally, changed my perspective. And then also just within the range of like, I've realized that there are a lot of things in life that should be serious, and commitment is serious, and having a family is serious, and getting the government involved with someone you love so much is serious, and getting married is serious. But I think the purpose of a relationship is to return you to a state of playfulness, like the point of life, playfulness. So I talk a lot in the book about playfulness and humor and emotional bids for connection and quirkiness and all these things that I think we've lost in the search for love, and talk about in the search ourselves as well, our spark. Like dating has become so frustrating for a lot of people that it's become this overbearing, cynical and serious endeavor that we have, and then add to it the pressure of finding someone. We have completely lost sight of the fact that the point of a relationship is to find someone who's really freaking weird and makes you weird, and you just enjoy life together. And so a lot of the book is from that perspective, and I think it's helpful to remind ourselves of that.
Absolutely. Playfulness is something that we often lose as adults. And I just feel like the world, if you look back throughout time, it's always been intense. There's always some sort of
Yes,
intense dynamic and wars and all of these things that we're experiencing in
of course.
our current version. But yeah, we need playfulness and partners. There has to be. I mean, partnership is not sustainable if you don't have that silly, playful, full weirdness coming out.
Absolutely. I mean, and like it's easy to say that because it's a nice thing to say, but it trickles into so many areas of a relationship that we talk about communication. We talk about I referenced the work of the Gottmans, and like they refer to it as bids for connection. Like, how do you connect with someone? Especially, how do you connect with someone you know really well, and you know everything about them, and you're with them every single day? How do you continue to connect with everything about them? You've asked every single question. How do you connect with someone like that? I talk in the book about a couple studies that prove that it's not just like humor, for instance. It's not just, oh, we laugh together at things. It's we create shared moments of humor together. That is like our powers combined to go from 0 to 1. We create it together is an incredibly powerful thing. And it's up there as far as what makes a relationship sticky. It's up there with the more powerful forms of communication, and being open to feelings and having deep and dark conversations with a partner. Like, it is up there as far as the things that will make a relationship work. And especially in light of some people are like, oh, I feel boring in my partnership or this or that. I think that we come back to the question, in what ways are you too playful with each other on your own? Are you giving and receiving bids for connection from a place of playfulness and humor? I think is something that we should ask ourselves.
Yeah, totally. You recently did an episode on your solo podcast, which is a new mindset, who dis, which I love. I'm going to say it over and over because it's so cute. Um, it's about breadcrumbs and knowing when to leave when the person, sometimes more often male, is not giving you is not showing up fully. It's just breadcrumbs. So I'd love for you to
Yes.
talk about breadcrumbs and how to identify them and when to leave. And what I love, this is a quote that you ask people to question, and it's such a gold nugget. If I removed the hope of what could be, would I still want what they are giving me right now? And
Mm.
when I first heard that, I was like, ugh. I was thinking of the person the situationship I was in for 6 months. But then I was like, oh, like thinking of my marriage of almost 8 years and
Yeah.
relationship at 14. And it's like, wow, it's just such a really poignant question to ask ourselves.
And yeah, so I mean, like breadcrumbing is also one of those internet things where if someone's effort doesn't line up with our expectations of it, suddenly it becomes breadcrumbing. So it's very difficult, which is why I generally try to lean away from labels. But that one, of course, is just so socially apparent. I wanted to address it, and I've addressed it in many different ways. I think the most difficult thing about it is that it preys on the one thing that I don't think we should ever lose, which is hope, which is hope for more, which is hope that potential becomes reality. If we don't have that, we're operating from an incredibly draining perspective of cynicism and not believing in someone's merit in their words. So that's why it's so difficult that like someone's breadcrumb, a breadcrumb just being a small piece of effort to keep you on the line and keep you interested. It's not enough to feed you fully. It probably doesn't match up with the energy and effort you give, but it's there and it's apparent and it's a thing. And you can't ignore it because it's clearly effort, but it's not enough. And it preys on that thing. It preys on hope, the belief that, okay, I'm dating this person. I like what I see. It's not quite enough, but like that's how relationships are. And I even talk in the book about, the idea that, you know, a lot of people have come to this, I call it struggle love in the book, the belief that all love is a struggle until it's not. That is every piece of relationship that we're in, every relationship that we're in is going to be something that we have to navigate from a perspective of giving in and negotiating and proving worth until finally we get the version that we love. If I just eat enough breadcrumbs, eventually I'll get the full feast. We've a lot of people, not because they're bad people or dumb or naive or anything, but because society and past partners have reinforced it, we think that all love is a struggle until it's not. And the result is I should be happy with what I have until they finally decide to give me the version that I deserve. And it's such a slippery slope that, of course, leads us to stick out relationships with someone who only has breadcrumbs to give, who isn't serious, or at the worst, not only isn't bought into us, but isn't bought into the idea of monogamy and commitment in the first place. So it's very difficult. But that question I have found is really powerful because it is an attempt to root ourselves in the present, to realize that, yes, okay, people love in different ways. People love from different sources, right? People give what they tend to want to receive. People give with what their partner wanted to receive. We recognize that. And we give some patience there and we communicate. But ultimately, that question of, if I removed hope for more, is what they're offering me good enough? It's a pretty sobering question. And I think if you've done some of the other work that I just referenced, having conversations, being a little bit patient and empathetic, because again, people can love you in their own way, but it doesn't align with how you want to be loved. Are you actually discussing that? I think that's the questions that's going to be like, okay, well, this is a crumb and it doesn't align with what I want. And from a personal ownership perspective, it also doesn't align with what I offer, reciprocity. Therefore, I probably need to move along. So, yeah, it's a combination of difficult things. And I hope people never lose their hope and their desire for potential, because I think it's really, really important, especially in light of people nowadays having this mentality of the catch flights, not feelings. I only match energies. I think is a really wrong way to go about dating. So I hope people hang on to hope, but do it armed with a question like that.
I love it. And I find that I've done this work for a long time. Obviously, practice mindfulness and self-awareness and very aware of patterns and very aware
Yeah.
of blind spots of patterns. And so like just to talk a little bit further about this, like in this situationship, I was like, oh, okay, well, he's avoidant. So then I would, in order to extend the life of this thing where he clearly showed signs of not having a lot of capacity at the beginning, which at first I was like, oh, that's great because I don't want anything serious. I just need a distraction to enter back into this
Sure.
world. And he was a really good one. But then I find myself manipulating, knowing that he's like an avoidant. But that's a form of abandoning myself. So like I really want you to speak to a little bit about, just to encourage me and everybody listening, like to not be afraid to fully show up as ourselves. And even though like I have a history of just like playing it cool to try and, just like seem low maintenance or whatever, just like we need to step into like fully what we need from day one to give to vet these people. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
we're gonna find the person that's okay for, and it's not gonna be.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, it's easy for me to write these things, and it's also easy for me to do this from a male perspective, where it is expected of you to be assertive and clear and concise. Like I really try to be acknowledging of gender differences and just differences in people. I will say though, like I am such a big advocate of people being high maintenance in the way that I describe it. I also am a big proponent of never doing the I only match energy. The whole purpose of dating is, in my mind, unless again you're just trying to enjoy and you don't have you're strictly trying to be casual and pass some time. Anything other than that, your whole job is to move someone from maybe into yes or no. And the only way to do that, well, the wrong way to do that, is to match their energy. And that's what so many people are trying to do, especially in light of trying to be chill and low maintenance, but also in this weird self-preservation way where they're like, well, let me see what you got. And then if it's good, I'll give you some more of what I've got. All that does is delay the inevitable, which is end up realizing they don't have anything. The best way to get data quicker is to give more quicker. And I always encourage people. I say you should be the one to try first, to love first, to be energetic first, to follow up first, because it gives you an immediate new lens to gauge their behavior against. And you'll very quickly realize if they're on your level or not. And that's why I'm always at odds with the I only match, the catch flights, not feelings, the I want to be chill. One of my best performing quotes, which reflects the fact that we know this and yet we don't do it because of so many different reasons. I wrote that, you're not meant to be low maintenance. You're meant to be high maintenance because you love a lot, you care a lot, and you should expect the same in return. If it's rooted in reciprocity, you're never too much or high maintenance. That cannot be the standard that we're applying to ourselves. We're using effort and we're using energy and we're using love and we're using trying first and we're using effort to gauge where they are. And in that sense, I think it's absolutely all right to go into a date, into a relationship, and exactly speak to what you're looking for in light of what you offer, right? It's not some weird lopsided, I deserve the world thing, but I'm not going to offer the world. Like it's always grounded. But in that sense, the endeavor is a very practical one. It is a fact-finding mission where you're not waiting for clarity, you're creating it for yourself. And, but again, it's we have the logic backwards. We think it's a self-preservation tactic where, that is sitting back and waiting, hoping that they'll change or hoping that, they'll take the charge and lead or something like that. But really, it just sets you up to waste more time. So in light of the most valuable asset we have, which is time, I say, create clarity for yourself by being the one who's willing to love first, not in a naive way, but in a way that says, let me see if this person is on the level and let me find out quickly so that I can stay or I can go. I think to me, it's that simple.
Yeah, I love it. I'm like, okay, accept the mission.
Easier said than done. Obviously, I really try to preface that. It's easy to say these things. The reality of wanting to be liked and the reality of empathy and the reality of someone who's always been a giver it complicates things. And then you go all the way back and you talk to a therapist, the reality of your upbringing, the way that you have been taught about how do you receive love? How much love do you have to give until you receive love? Like a lot of this goes back to our childhood, and I don't touch that. That is a conversation for your journal and your therapist. But also a good place to start.
I love it. I love it. Um, Speaking of journaling, what is contrast journaling?
Yeah, that's usually how I refer to my style of journaling, which is, you know, like any form of journaling is powerful. Don't get me wrong. It is great to sit down in the morning and say, I'm grateful for my health. It's great to sit down and say, I want to be in a relationship where XYZ, and you're just putting words to the worth that you've prescribed in life. That's amazing. The best clarity I found comes from the confusion. Like it comes from the questions you have. It comes from the space between yesterday and today, the contrast, right? The in between, the confusion of life. And it's like the point of journaling, yes, certainly is affirming beliefs and putting words behind describing what you want in life. It's incredibly powerful, if not a large, large part of my work. But if you want a breakthrough, that is, if you want to create a piece of clarity in your life that you live by, that will inspire you to move differently, you have to be willing to sit in the contrast. So, and the contrast is anything between the contrast between the present and the past and how that carries into the future. It's also the contrast between anxious thoughts. Like a lot of my work is let's put the anxious thought down on paper. Then let's ask ourselves, what if I'm wrong about this? Let's explore the contrast between being right and being wrong about the anxiety. Let's show ourselves what the two realities are that are dictated by those things. I also, as much as I'm not like a huge spiritual abundance manifestation guy, I do talk a lot about manifestation in the sense of two stories that you tell yourself and the contrast being the space between them. That is the story you tell yourself about what's available to you and the story you tell yourself about what you want, right? So the logic that would sit between saying, I want a loving partner, but there's no good men left. Those two things cannot be true at the same time. We have to explore the space between them. That would be contrast, and it's incredibly powerful to explore. So just a little bit of flavor there on both sides.
I love it. Um, as you talk about, I'm not a big manifestation guy, but you seem like to be manifesting.
Maybe that's
Like,
not true.
yeah,
I am, but just not in the sense of younger me when I would hear it and like, what this is the secret. This is about visualize. To me, it's all about language. It's all about the stories you tell yourself. So in that sense, maybe I'm the world's biggest manifestation guy. I just think I had to come around to a more practical definition of it.
yeah. I was going to ask because
Yeah.
I heard you mention that you're not a big secret guy, and or or just like you question
Yeah.
like the.
Yeah.
So, what is your practical method? Is it just that contrast journaling, and what are your kind of overarching spiritual beliefs, if you feel comfortable sharing,
Oh, of course.
on like what we're able to co-create in our lives? Because for me, I'm
Yeah.
like constantly trying to expand what I think is possible for myself, and
Yeah.
I have pretty big aspirations.
Me too. Me too. Yeah, well, I would say it's two things. It's the one that I just referenced, right? So manifesting is making sure that the story supports itself logically. That is, for me to be able to vent about something that frustrates me, but still describe a reality that presents what I want to live, and make sure those two things are connected by logic. And writing that down. I do that all the time. Case, I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. Amazing. So I cannot be telling myself things like, no one will care what I have to write. I'm not good enough. None of the imposter syndrome, none of the insecure beliefs. Honoring the feeling, because I'm not just swiping those under the rug, but I'm honoring them, but still creating space for that reality. The other thing that like is something that I'm like aggressively practicing as of late is maybe not that radical form of visualizing, but is a visualization practice that really taps into all of the great neuroscience behind visualizing, the acknowledgement that the brain doesn't really know the difference between a memory and a really in-depth visualization, right? I'm not a scientist, but the same parts of the brain fire when you think back on something you actually lived as it does when you have a really in-depth visualization of a future moment. And for me, it makes me just realize how powerful it is to visualize and manifest and write from the perspective of memories as opposed to fantasies. And this has been really big for me because I think a lot of people we're fake it till we make it type people. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of room for that. But for me, my mindset as of late has been more of the feel it until it's familiar territory. You create familiarity with a feeling, you're firing the same brain functions as you are with a memory, because familiarity is memory driven. So a lot of my visualization practice is putting myself in the future and then looking back and like I'm telling a story about the memory of the thing that I've already lived. And what does that look like? And as specific as I can, and using that to also fill the space in my manifestation in the way that I write. So it's all about like creating familiarity with emotions that maybe I don't have yet, but I'm not fantasizing and trying to create them out of thin air. I'm remembering them. These are memories, future memories. Remember your future kind of idea. So I think those two things for me, both like a belief practice, but also a very tangible written practice, has been really grounded. And I enjoy doing it, and it really helps give me clarity and familiarity, most importantly of all.
It's so true. It's so good. I love that you just shared that. I do a version of that I actually I think learned from The Secret, but it's worked for me. And it's writing like in my journal because again, that's as powerful as it is for you. When I write it down, it like floods my system with actual experience. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm so happy. So say I want a house in Aspen, which is something that I do want because I keep
Nice.
going back there and I love it. Um, I'm so happy and grateful now that I have this beautiful house in Aspen and it just like, and I feel into that and I write it down and I write it down every day. And then I mix in things that I actually have. So I'm like, I'm so happy and grateful that my daughter and I are healthy. And so I just play like it's the
Yeah.
playfulness of like
Yeah.
fantasizing. And I think also it's like in the all that I know and knowing what I don't know, I play with this idea of I want the house in Aspen because, like you said, it in the future it exists, and that's that thing. So I go from like you, the future memory. I mean, there's a reason that it's I almost like flip time, the linear
Yeah.
time, and go backwards.
Yeah.
It's like I only have this dream in my heart because I'm experiencing it in the future, and like time is actually reversed. You know what I mean? And playing
I
with
do.
that
Yeah.
kind of sci-fi vibe.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're doing variations of the same thing. I like approach it like I'm in the future and I'm reminiscing on that event, that one breakthrough, and I'm telling someone a story about it, right? And as much detail, where was I when it happened, what happened, like just trying to fill as many pieces of the visual, the smells, the sights, everything, the touch to really prompt that feeling. Well, I know this feeling. This is a familiar feeling. And as much as just being familiar with the feeling doesn't necessarily going just to snap your fingers and create things, but familiarity is a heck of a thing. And I think it leads to more aligned actions, better clarity, better decisions. So I think, yeah, these type of practices, I think younger me would have been like, this is just goofy. And maybe that was an immaturity thing or just a lack of, confidence in myself to be able to just sit in a feeling rather than to just be go, go, go. But I really do believe in it now. And yeah, it's definitely like an important part of my practice and teachings as well, because it really touches the various elements of emotional vocabulary aligned with emotions. How are we picturing the emotions? How are we feeling the emotions? So it all relates to me, for me.
And it's such a good practice too, and on all of your work and this reflective kind of, brute force mindful lifestyle
Yeah.
is if we, I just always go back to the simple thing. If we if we let down the reins of our mind, which is like a wild stallion, right? It is hardwired to go to survival, which is driven by fear. So you're
Yes.
vigilant and you're going to be looking for things that are, excuse negative. But we have this brilliant capacity in everything you just talked about. Like if we take the reins of our mind and we do these daily practices, we are consciously co-creating with this power of the mind. But we have to start to become aware of the language we use towards ourselves and when we're in default. So once we start to do these practices and on a daily basis, we literally take the reins of our life.
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
I do. I mean, I even in the book I referenced the work of Ellen Langer. Well, maybe you're familiar with her work. She's kind of OG grandmother of optimism and mindfulness. In the 70s, she had this thing called the Xerox experiment where she was curious about what language was persuasive to other people, which is interesting. But I also thought it was incredibly powerful when it comes to how, like, as humans, and to your point about the brain just swinging, we have to persuade ourselves to do the most honest and right and radical things in life. Otherwise, those crazy subconscious Michael Singer thoughts are just going to go overload. And in her work, it was basically how can I persuade people to let me cut them to make photocopies. A Xerox machine is a photocopier for the younger folks listening. And she was curious, like, what would allow me to cut a line of 20 people all waiting to make a photocopy? And she basically did it in different ways, but basically showed that if you have a strong why behind it, saying, I need to cut in line because I'm in a rush, for instance, almost like 90, I think it was like 95% of people let her cut them because she said, I'm in a rush. And, you know, it's interesting. And there was a bunch of nuance with the study, but I always thought that was so interesting. Like, how tapped into our why, and not necessarily like our why for a living, but the why behind the things we say we want and deserve. How tapped into that are we? Can we write it down and memorize it and turn to it in times where we're confused or beat up or just not feeling it? That, I think, is an incredibly powerful self-persuasion technique that we're not so locked into because we're too amenable to other people's whys or distracted from our why, or we haven't taken time to think about the why behind a lot of things. So even in the book, I ask people, why do you even want love? Such a basic question where most people say, well, what do you mean? That's what you're supposed to do, or I want to have a family, or I don't want to be alone. To your point, fear-based reaction to desires. So I think a strong rooted because, why, I statements, I think is incredibly powerful. And then you write it down, and that is the thing that you turn to when you're feeling inevitable human doubt, but you've written it down and you've decided it. Maybe you even tattoo it. I don't even know. People tattoo my writing sometimes, and it's like crazy. It's like it serves a powerful purpose.
How cool is that? I mean, that's like deep resonance if people are tattooing their bodies with your work. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a little strange. Sometimes people, it's like you would expect them to like take the quote and then like stylize it in a different way, but some people literally take a photo of my handwriting and then their tattoo artist just stencils it so it's in my handwriting. I'm like, I could probably do better for you if you want, but that'll work.
That's amazing, honestly. But yes, I think that's why people in their older age, you're still very young. I'm a little ahead of you, but we start to give less fucks for, pardon me for my audience that doesn't like cursing, but there's no better way to say it. Like as we get older, because that time, our why gets stronger because the time pressure, gets
Yeah.
shorter and more
Yeah.
intense.
Mm.
So really I think that's so important to get clear on your why. And I want a house in Aspen. Why? Like it's a feeling. It's what the feeling that how vital and energized and at peace I feel when I'm in that location, and to want to experience that every day, and or have the freedom to go there when I need to. Anyways, I just think that's so important for people to reflect and discover about themselves and their
I
whys.
agree. Yeah, and it's very astute what you said too. It's like, yeah, it's when we put pressure on ourselves, we can come up with it, whether that's the pressure of time or whether that's the pressure of literally sitting down and doing it. So I'd say give yourself that catalyst to come up with it, and it's incredibly useful.
So you, this feels like a very intense time in the world, for various reasons. I also think like just electromagnetically and Schumann's resonance and all these things. There's pressure and an awakening happening based on invisible forces we cannot see or know. But people are like going through it. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you feel that from your audience.
Yeah.
Have you been through something intense in the last year or two? And like, what was the aha? How did it shape you? Have you lived through something like that recently?
I mean, without being too specific, I mean, I would say I would even go back a little bit further. I mean, I felt like when I quit my job to step into this work full time, like that was a big pivotal moment for me because I felt very disconnected from myself and just like everything creativity is a huge part of, I think, why I'm here. And I just felt very devoid of that when I was working and doing this all full time or part time. So I think when I made the final decision to leave behind, I had a 12-year career in advertising. I was good at it. I started as an account executive and worked my way up to a regional vice president. It was a very, very big part of my identity as well. Come from a pretty traditional family as well, doctors and lawyers. And so it was a big moment of dismissing expectations as well as just like a massive reset in my mid 30s. So that was really big for me. I think I think two things, and maybe it's helpful in light of what you just referenced, as far as like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and whether it's very tangible and practical of humans doing human stuff, or there's some energy at play here that we can't quite put our finger on. I'm not so sure, but I think the two things that have really helped me, and these are also backed by quite a bit of studies, but I think I managed to step into a place where, in light of my past, where I was pretty cynical or unfair of myself, and maybe in my judgment of others as well, a big pivot into making trust my default. That's how I say it, trust as my default. That's trust in myself and trust in others. Rather important there as well, that you and I both can succeed. That if you say something, I trust you'll do it. That I can live with a certain amount of peace, not naive peace, but just peace, that trust is my default. And also in myself, that I can make a decision and I trust that it will lead me somewhere. And whether that's right or wrong, I'll figure it out. And then also, like, I've really tapped into, and that the anecdote on the trust as your default comes from, there's a study that basically followed people in their careers and showed that people who had trust as their default versus a cynical view of themselves in the world, they made way more money, were promoted way more, and were happier. So that always put some wind in my sails about trust as your default. Another one that I've really stepped into, and I think also really helped me make that decision to leave that life and career behind, was using regret as a framework for decision making. That is, using regret as a compass, as opposed to the thing to avoid. That is stepping into, a very practical mindset of, will I regret not doing this? And then using that to not only make the decision, but to feel hopeful about the decision. There's a study that I referenced that showed that they had these groups of people make decisions, big ones and small ones. They had some of them say, hey, before you make this decision, I want you to think about regret. Would you regret not making this decision? And the people who were told to do that versus that didn't do the regret framework for making the decision, the regret framework people reported a much higher belief in hope and optimism, because they were like, well, I've done the reflection, I've done all I can, and now I've done the thing, so it's got to be good enough, right? There's a certain calm assurance that comes with, I've done all I can. And to me, I've really stepped into that, and I think regret as a compass rather than something we're averse to is really, really powerful. And that helped me with that decision. It helps me with future decisions, because it's like, well, I've done the in reflection, and I've done the action. What more is there to do other than to be hopeful that it leads me in the right direction? So, long-winded answer, but both of those being for me like really important signs of hope and optimism that are equal parts reflection and action. So it's like good yin and yang, type A and type B. Has really, really helped me.
That was a brilliant answer, because I was going to be like, what gave you the courage to do it?
Right.
And for me, it's like a feeling, an intuition, and like, but also trusting that when you follow that, or when I follow that feeling of vitality and pull and expansion and like excitement, that never failed me. Like, you figure it out,
Yeah.
even if you have to go to the wrong place first to get to
Yeah.
the right place.
Yeah.
But now you've kind of coupled that with the regret reflection, like, will I regret not doing this? Or could I possibly regret staying? Or that's just, it's so interesting, because you and I are very similar in our
Yeah.
mindset and our practices, but you have kind of like a practical hat on. I have more of like a spiritual hat on, and
Beautiful.
I just love
it's a
it.
beautiful
Yeah.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to learn more from you as well. I think that's like the next evolution for me, because I am so like practical and logic driven. It needs some balance. So it's beautiful.
That's awesome. So where can people get this amazing book, The Opposite
Thank
of
you.
Settling, that is going to be a New York Times bestseller, because I believe in you and I see it for you.
Oh, thank
I
you.
remember it,
There you go. Yeah, you remember that. It was a
I remember
Tuesday,
it.
Wednesday, whatever. Well, I appreciate that. And thank you for giving me space to talk about the things that I'm passionate about. You can get it everywhere. Easiest is always Amazon, but you can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it in person. And I appreciate that. It means a lot.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. I know all the listeners are going to be, or viewers are going to be really moved by maybe get a tattoo, but
Do it. Why not?
yeah. Are you going to regret it? That's the question. If you're
There you
not,
go.
do
Are you
it.
going to regret not doing it?
That's the question.
That's the question.
Awesome, Case. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.